Hello, and welcome to part two of the perception lecture, chapter four. So, we have already covered stage one and stage two of interpersonal perception, which leads us to stage three, interpretation. So, once we have selected, which was stage one, and organized our perceptions, stage two, we interpret them in a way that makes some sort of sense. So, oops, sorry, too soon. So it's where we sort of give what we observe meaning. Like, what did that mean? So, for example, let's say you went out to dinner with a friend and your friend was being much quieter than she normally is. And you're thinking, she's a lot quieter than she normally is. What does that mean? Now, if you think, well, you know what? I know what it means, why she's being so quiet. When she invited me to her party she was having last month, at the last minute I canceled and I didn't really give a good reason. And now here we are, the first time we've seen each other since then, and she's being quieter than normal. She's got to be, pretty ticked off at me because I didn't go to that party and I just canceled at the last second. Well, is that the only reason she might be quiet? No. Again, if we were face to face, I would ask, what are some other reasons, students, that this friend might be quieter than she normally is? Now, maybe she is pretty pissed at you because you canceled at the last minute. That wasn't good. Why'd you do that? Why would you do that? Well, anyway, maybe she's not feeling well. Maybe she's had a really hard day at work. Maybe she's thinking about her sick dog at home. Maybe she's just exhausted. Maybe she's on her period. There could be lots of reasons other than the fact that she's mad at you. So, something that is called cognitive complexity. Let's see. This is the ability to construct a variety of different frameworks for viewing an issue. So this is a component from the list of chapter one qualities that make a competent communicator. Someone who is a competent communicator has high cognitive complexity. So for example, in the situation I just described, if you think, oh my God, she's mad at me for canceling on her party, that's it. And you don't even entertain the notion there could be other reasons why she's more quiet, you have low cognitive complexity. However, if you're thinking, well, she could be mad because I canceled at the last minute. That was pretty crappy of me to do that. But she might not be feeling well. Maybe she had a bad day. Maybe she's got some big problem. Maybe her dog is sick. Who knows? There could be lots of reasons why she's quiet. Then that's good because you have higher cognitive complexity. We like good communication. Good communicators have higher cognitive complexity. So what influences our perception? What influences how we attach meaning to what we observe? And I'm going to go through these rather quickly because a lot of this overlaps what I talked about earlier already today. But sometimes it could be a physiological issue. So I know, like, if I'm not feeling that great, if I have a headache or I just feel sick and I've got a cold, I interpret things in a lot different way. I interpret things usually more negatively, right? Because I'm not feeling well. Or if I'm tired, or if I'm hungry. Morning person, night person. Let me go back to these three. So when you're tired and hungry, you process things a lot differently. Like for me, I get things bother me more when I'm tired and hungry. And maybe my kids will do something. And if I was less tired and less hungry, I might think what they did was funny. But if I'm more tired and more hungry, that same behavior might be perceived by me as annoying. So being tired and hungry, I don't know about you, but that's a big one for me. I don't do well when I'm tired and hungry. And then morning person, night person, I know back when we used to have face-to-face classes, I had a really hard time with my night classes because I'm more of a morning person. So I enjoyed my students, enjoyed the interaction, and I found the interaction much more exciting and stimulating when it was the morning versus my poor night students where, I'm not a night person. So I tried to fake it, but I had a harder time. I can't lie to you, my online classes. So if you ever had that where if you're not a morning person and you're trying to go to a morning class and the teacher just seems awful to you, well, it could be the problem that you're not a morning person. And we talked earlier about our mood and how that influences what we notice. It also just influences how we perceive what we observe. So have you ever gone or seen, whether you saw it in your house or wherever you saw it, a movie that was supposed to be funny, like a comedy movie, but you were not in a good mood? So you thought the movie was pretty stupid. That was a stupid movie. Maybe you saw the movie again a little while down the road and you were in a better mood and you're like, oh, that movie's pretty funny. Same movie, but because of your mood, it changed how you perceived it. Our self-concept. So have you ever had one of those days? We talked about self-concept, last week, a couple weeks ago, where you're just not feeling that great about yourself. You're just feeling kind of down about yourself. And then maybe someone makes a comment to you. Maybe they make a joke, but you don't think it's very funny. You take it personal or it hurts your feelings. And had you have been feeling better about yourself, you might have actually thought that was funny. But now it's not so funny because of the way you're feeling about yourself. So with perception, we can be incorrect in terms of how we interpret what we notice. So in my example prior, if I had assumed that my friend was mad at me and that's why she's being quiet because I canceled, and the reason was that she was having stomach cramps, I was wrong, right? I was just dead wrong. So we're going to talk about some of the ways we get it wrong in our perception. There's something we call the self-serving bias, which is when we judge ourselves more favorably than we do others. So basically, we give ourselves a pass. And if we're doing something, we think it's fine or we don't even notice. However, if another person does the same thing, we notice and we don't like it. So here's my famous example. Back in the day when I used to go to the gym, when everything was open, my gym has a parking structure. And when I used to bring my little kids, my twins that were like 3 years old, it would be me and the twins walking in the parking structure. And I didn't like it because the cars would go by and I would not like cars that drove fast. So anytime a car drove by really fast, when I'm trying to hold their hands and walk through the parking structure, I wouldn't like it. I would see the car going fast and think, why can't they slow down? Well, around that same time, I didn't have my twins with me. I was going home, but apparently I was in a rush to go home because what was I doing in the parking structure? Well, I'm not going to tell you what I was doing, but you can guess what I was doing. I was just driving along and I look at someone and they look at me and they say, slow down. So guess what I was doing? I was driving fast in the parking structure. Now, it's not because I think I'm so great that I'm allowed to drive fast and I'm like the queen and I should be allowed to do whatever I want. I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing. And this is how self-serving bias works. It's not like you're being a hypocrite. It's just that you're not even really aware that you're doing something, or if you are doing it, you think it's like you have a good reason, so it doesn't even matter. But when someone else does it, you notice. And you're like, I don't like why you're doing that. But you do the same thing. Okay, so that's the self-serving bias. We are influenced by the obvious. We are influenced by the obvious. I can tell you, I've had students in class wearing like a CSULB sweatshirt. And I'll say, oh, that's great. You're going to go to Cal State Long Beach? And they'll go, what? Huh? And your sweatshirt, CSULB? Oh, no, I don't even know where I got this sweatshirt. Oh, sorry. To me, it was just like obvious. I just assumed that that's the sweatshirt. So obviously they're going there, college student wearing that sweatshirt. Call me crazy. But we do this all the time. We make our assumptions based on what we think is obvious. We cling to first impressions. So there's a lot of research that shows this. There is something called the halo effect. And research has proven the halo effect to be true, which is the tendency to form an overall positive impression of a person on the basis of one positive characteristic. So, did you ever have a friend growing up who, when they met your parents, they did a really good job of impressing your parents? Well, then maybe your parents gave that kid a little invisible halo. So, down the road, if like the two of you were in trouble, maybe your parents blamed you because they thought that other kid was such a great kid because the kid they already gave the invisible halo to. So that's the halo effect. It shows the power of a first impression. A lot of job interview research shows this over and over again, that if you make a bad first impression on a job interview, it is almost impossible to recover from that, because you also, the halo effect works in the negative, like the devil horn, you get little devil horns, and then anything you say or do on the interview gets slanted in their head as a negative quality because you made a bad first impression. And by the way, we'll talk about first impressions on job interview another day, but I have to mention, what's the best way to ruin your first impression on a job interview? To come late. You show up late to a job interview, you've already made a horrible first impression, and the halo effect would tell us it's almost impossible to turn that around. So let that be a lesson. We assume that others are like us. So back to you going out with your friend, you just think, well, obviously she's mad at me for canceling, because if something else was going on, she would just tell me, because that's what I would do. I would just say, hey, my stomach hurts. Hey, my dog's having problems. Hey, I'm having a bad day. Maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe for their own personal reasons, they don't want to bring it up, but it's obvious something's wrong, but they don't want to say. So that's why you're just thinking they're mad at you, because you assume that they would say something, because that's what you would do. But everybody isn't like you. I feel like I'm being very mean to you this lecture. I don't mean to be so mean. I'm sure you're all very nice people. Obviously, I don't even know any of you. So I just know you from your introduce yourself posts, and you all seem very lovely and sweet. So please don't take anything I'm saying personal, because I'm just rambling here, So anyway, it's easier for me to go to extreme examples to make a point. I like my examples to be very obvious, so that when you're trying to understand this, it makes more sense. So that's my disclaimer. We are influenced by our expectations. So let's say you signed up to take my class and somebody told you, oh, Dinger's a horrible teacher. I can't believe you're taking Dinger. Well, now you're expecting me to be horrible, so you're going to think I'm more horrible. So you're going to come to one of my lecture videos and go, oh, that was the worst lecture video. Her lighting was all bad, and her face was too bright, and you couldn't get the PowerPoint fast enough. So you're going to notice, and you're going to interpret my teaching as more negative, because you were already expecting it to not be so great. So typically, our perceptions match up to what we are expecting. And this is huge. We favor the negative. So human beings are more likely to notice and remember anything negative more easily and more often than anything positive. So we talked in the self-concept chapter about how parents are more likely to give negative messages to children. This is why, and I talked about this in that self-concept lecture. Parents are going to all the time more easily notice anything their kids do that is negative. Like, you left the cup out. Oh, you did this. You slammed the door. Your room is So the things that are negative are just like screaming out there. That's just what we notice, and that's what we remember. And then the good stuff the kid does, we notice, but it kind of runs all together and we take it for granted. So if I asked you, like, if you have a significant other, when's the last time the two of you had a fight? And what was it about? Most of you could probably tell me, even if it was a long time ago. Or if I asked you, what was your first big fight? You probably could remember that, because it's negative. And if I said, when's the last time the two of you had a great time? I'm not saying you couldn't remember that, but I'm sure the negative is more in your head. That's just how we humans are. We notice the negative. We favor the negative. So that ends up not helping us when we're in relationships, because we don't want to only be bringing up things that bother us and that are negative. And I'll talk about that more in other chapters. I mentioned it in the self-concept chapter. Oh my gosh, we take things personally. We think everything is about us. So here are friends being quiet at dinner, and we think it's about us. Oh, she's mad at me. And maybe it has nothing to do with you. So you have to watch out. If you're the kind of person that takes a lot of things personally, you have to realize that it's probably not about you. You're not that important where everything is about you. But a lot of times we make inaccurate assumptions because we take something personally. Okay, we are going to end this discussion talking about empathy and its role in perception. So you've heard of empathy, right? Empathy is the ability to recreate another person's perspective, to experience it from his or her point of view. So we say it's like putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Sympathy is different from empathy. It is where you feel compassion or concern, but you don't share in the other person's emotions. Sympathy is not bad. It is just not the same as empathy. So with empathy, the experience becomes your own. So does that make sense? So sympathy, you feel bad, but empathy, it's like you take it on. You take on their experience. Oops, I'm going to go back. One more little quick way to clarify. I thought I had it on PowerPoint. With sympathy, it's like you're an outsider. And with empathy, it's like you are an insider. Nothing wrong with sympathy. It's just different from empathy. So there are 3 different dimensions to empathy. One is the perspective-taking dimension, which is the ability to take on the viewpoint of another person. So if you are having a disagreement about something with another person in terms of your points of view, you think this way about a topic, they think this way about a topic. If, let's say, you have empathy, you are able to understand their side of the issue. You see their perspective. You do not need to agree to have empathy. But if you can see their point of view, that is empathy. You're able to see, to understand the viewpoint of another person. Then there's an emotional dimension to empathy where you experience the same feelings as they do. It's not literally like they're crying, you start crying. It's not like a matchup thing, but it's like they're very sad about something and you can understand their emotion. Or they're very sad about something. You're like, I don't know why you're so sad. That's not even a big deal. That would not be empathy. But if you can understand and experience what they're feeling, whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, whatever, that's empathy. And then there's the third, which is a concern. So not only do we think and feel the same way as the other person, we also have a sincere interest in their well-being. And that's what's fueling the empathy, because you have such a sincere interest in their well-being. You really want to understand how they think and how they feel. So there's a misconception about empathy. The misconception is the only way you can have empathy for someone is if you have had the same exact experience as they have had. That's not true, and I'll explain. But for example, let's say my friend calls me very upset because her cat just died. And let's say I've never had a cat, and let's say I hate cats. I can still have empathy. Yes, I can. Here's how. One thing I would need is an open mind. Empathy always requires you to open your mind and try to understand this person's emotion or this person's point of view. Without open-mindedness, you can't have empathy. So it's not about having the same experience. It's about you and how open-minded you are. You also need what SpongeBob was trying to give you, and Barney and, Willy Wonka, imagination. Because if what they're thinking is really way off from what you're thinking or feeling, and you're like, I have an open mind, but I still think they're crazy, then you really have to have an imagination because you've got to use your imagination to imagine how they are feeling or how they are thinking. That's tough. I know. It depends on how different it is from your point of view already. And then commitment. Again, this is what's fueling your empathy. You have a commitment to understanding this person because you are concerned about this person. So that's why you are making this effort to be open-minded, to use your imagination, to try to understand where they are coming from. Now, I am not your moral compass. I am not telling you you should have empathy for all humans in the world. It doesn't matter how different they think. This is not that kind of a class. I'm just pointing out what empathy is all about. And a lot of communication problems happen because people have two different points of view, and each person is steadfast thinking my point of view is accurate. No, my point of view is accurate. And that's where the battle comes. And a lot of times, both people's sides have merit, and it's really useful if this person can see this person's point of view and this person can see this person's point of view. Things can calm down. A lot of things can be more calm if you realize, especially if the two of you do care about each other, depending on who this person is. But if you are two people who care about each other, then you really should care about each other's perspectives, points of view, the other person's emotions. So it's a quality that's very important, especially in a personal type of interpersonal relationship. So in a friendship and a romantic relationship, it is very important that both of you have empathy for each other's points of view. If you're with someone and they seem to have very little empathy for your point of view, that should be a big red flag. You want to watch out for people that really only see life from their point of view and they think everybody else is crazy. You don't want to be in a close relationship with people like that because they're always going to think you're crazy. So it's not a fun way to live. Anyway, okay. So I believe that's the end of the show. Oh, that's the end of the show. Da, 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 da. So hopefully you enjoyed this lecture. I know it was a little bit long on perception and then a little bit of empathy at the end. And I will see you all soon. Stay healthy and safe. Bye. Am I still